There's this Chinese tier list that everybody has been passing around recently, and I'm gonna be telling you why you shouldn't be trusting this tier list. In fact, you shouldn't be trusting tier lists in general, and I'm gonna explain why in a little bit. I think tier lists are fun, they have its place. Characters like Verena are definitely like tier above any other characters, but tier lists are often not the most accurate thing, so you shouldn't just be like, oh, Encore is way better than whoever this character is, just because she's a higher tier. And I'm gonna be explaining why in a bit. But the most important thing that you have to understand why this tier list is not trustworthy is because you guys are passing it around without context. And I mean, I understand why. None of you can read Chinese, but I can read Chinese. For people who don't know, I'm natively Chinese and I speak Chinese fluently. In fact, I actually speak Chinese to crew games because you guys know their English sucks. So they're like, you know what, let's stop speaking English. Crew games and stuff are like, I'll just speak Chinese instead. So I actually often find a lot of my information off the Chinese theory crafting website, because a lot of people post like very detailed discussion about like how energy recharge work, or some people were talking about recently a Echo Pity, where if you kill like 3 elite Echo, your next one is guaranteed to be dropped. And I was like, oh, that's cool, so I made a video on it. So you'll see like I often like kind of port over information from the Chinese theory crafting community. And I want to be talking about this one today, why you shouldn't be trusting this tier list, and again, or tier list in general. Again, most people are porting it over without context. Obviously, the original uploader made a complete video in Chinese explaining like his thoughts, or actually her thought on like every single one of these characters. But I'm gonna explain and translate how this tier list works, and I realize I'm blocking a part of it. First of all, this tier list is based on theoretical rotation and DPS, which means these numbers might not be feasible in battle depending on your skills, depending on the rotation, or just depending on the fight. In fact, there's something it clarified it here. They physically say this in their red tag is that they are calculating theoretical DPS, and these numbers are kind of like expected DPS. They're not necessarily like real. So just judging it off this number and say like, oh, this character is better, is not the most accurate thing already. And I'll be showing you why in that case. The second thing about this list is that it's all based on sequence 0. So there are characters that get significantly better with sequence, especially the 4-star, since 4-star sequence are a lot more achievable than 5-star sequence. So, you know, Danji with a full 6 sequence might be better than say like Lin Yang, and it's not reflected on this tier list. And again, I understand why, because none of you can read Chinese, so you guys pass around the tier list with no context, and that's why you shouldn't be completely trusting the tier list. But the biggest reason why you shouldn't be trusting this tier list is because in-game performance could be completely different. And I'll be showing you right now. You know, on that tier list, you might see like character like Chixia is way better than Taochi, but in-game, depending on how you play it, depending on the boss, that could not reflect reality. In particular, against a boss like Mepis, if you're fighting against a boss like Mepis who is very mobile, you might not be able to get your entire bullet sequence off, and so your DPS expectation would be different. Especially because a character like Chixia cannot parry. And you'll be like, oh, I can just parry with a different characters. But then you often lose the buff. Character like Taochi has a buff that disappears when you switch characters, which means if you switch to sword characters to parry, you'll lose that buff. So that expected DPS will be different. On the other hand, a character like Danji is very good against the Mepis, at least in my opinion. That's because Danji can very easily maintain DPS uptime, and she also do her DPS in short window. That means it is a lot easier to expect that your Danji can dish out her full DPS potential compared to a character like Chixia. In fact, I'm about to show you one of the greatest examples using my favorite character of all time, Lin Yang. If you know about the monkey boss, you know that there's a part where he jumps out of the totem and he starts slamming the ground. And every single character in this game have to sit on the ground and watch him just boom, 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 boom. Well, not Lin Yang. If you're playing Lin Yang, you can just air walk up to the boss and keep hitting him. Therefore, you don't lose DPS compared to like every other character in the game. I bet you didn't see that one coming, of course, because you don't play Lin Yang, but I do. So there's a massive Lin Yang video coming tomorrow. But my point is, depending on the battle, depending on your skills, depending on the boss you're facing, every character can perform differently. And I think that's one of the greatest part about Wedding Wave, is that it is extremely reactive. Depending on your skill level, depending on the boss you're facing, you might find that some characters are just going to be playing better than the other. A character like Danji might be really good at doing damage with really good uptime, but if you can't utilize the uptime, or you just keep dying on Danji because you have skill issues, then she might not be that good for you. And I think that's the greatest part about this game compared to like any other game on the gacha market. You should determine what is actually good for your own play style. And that's one of the reasons why you just can't look at the DPS tier list and say like, oh, this character is better, so I'm gonna play that character. No, it doesn't work like that, especially in a game like Wedding Wave. Now, I'm not saying like tier list has no value at all. In fact, I think it serves some value. There are definitely characters that are, generally speaking, better than other characters. Farina is probably one of the best examples because Farina is just so overpowered that she is indeed like a league above any other characters. And I think tier list can kind of reflect that. There are certain characters that are not very good, maybe like Taochi, maybe like Yanwu, and therefore they deserve to be lower tier than like really, really good characters like Farina. But just looking at like, oh, Chixia do 2.6 seconds more damage than Danji, and so she's a better character. No, that's not how tier lists work. I think tier list has its place and a time, and it's fun, especially because they generate discussion, but they're not the source of truth. You shouldn't be looking at a tier list and be like, this character is like tier 1 and therefore they're just not as good as tier 0. No, find your own characters that you enjoy playing, the character that suit your playstyles, and just play it. You know, I personally also have made tier lists in the past during the second closed beta, according to what I believe was their second closed beta string. Now, obviously, this tier list is completely outdated because the game is different now. And a lot of people keep asking me like, oh, are you going to make an updated tier list? Maybe eventually, but I feel like it's unfair to make a tier list right now just because I don't have the knowledge of like every single characters right now about how they stand. And this is why other tier lists that you see are theoretically DPS. They kind of calculate what's a optimal rotation, and they expect you to be able to do this damage. When, again, in reality, that's not how it works. The gameplay is always going to be different every time. The boss pattern will be different every time. The way you play the characters might be different every time. Then that's what makes this game great, is that it is not the same every time. You can't just expect yourself to follow a DPS rotation and get this damage every time. And that's why you should not be passing tier lists blindly around, and you need to stop completely trusting tier lists, especially one where you can't even read. So yeah, that's all I gotta say today. Bye bye.